Hello everyone, welcome back, Loremaster of Sotek here, and welcome to the first installment of the Q&A series here on my channel about various subjects covering the Warhammer Fantasy Universe. So yesterday, I asked all of you guys on various forms of media to submit your questions about the Lizardmen. And after collecting all of them, at least at the time that I'm making this recording, there are a little over 90 questions, so it was a really big batch of questions. And I went through with a random number generator, and I just randomly picked out 10 of them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down the list of the ones that I randomly selected, and I'm going to answer those questions. Some of them require a little more explanation. One or, just a couple of them are more subjective questions, like who would beat who in a fight. And some of them, of course, can be answered very simply with a yes or a no, or just a very short answer. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Our first question comes from Milo Bruker. By the way, if I pronounce any of your usernames or names wrong, I apologize in advance. It's probably going to happen. And his question is, who is the strongest person Kroq-Gar and Grimlock can defeat? So this question is very easily subjective, because when you get into top tier characters fighting one another, it usually comes down to just luck, really, when you get on the top playing field. I will say Kroq-Gar, in my opinion, is one of the top 3 most powerful characters in the Warhammer Fantasy universe. In Warhammer Fantasy, power is often determined by age, plus or minus a few other facets. And Kroq-Gar is one of the oldest characters in the setting, only falling behind the likes of Lord Mazdamundi, Lord Kroak, and Kholek Suneater. That being said, the strongest person I think he could beat in the two of them together, obviously not themselves separate, as a team is what makes them truly unique and powerful. Probably Kholek Suneater, honestly. Not everyone will agree with that. It comes down to this. When Kholek Suneater and Kroq-Gar and Grimlock go against each other, both of them are extremely efficient at killing giant things. Grimlock is designed to kill massive, horrifying dragons and other massive creatures, while Kholek was able to just completely smash through a wall at Prague without really overexerting himself, and is also known for being able to beat the crap out of anything moderately gigantic. So they're both specialists when it comes to sort of that anti-large system of fighting. And on top of that, both of them have the ability to essentially hurl a type of magic at each other, with Kholek throwing lightning bolts and Kroq-Gar unleashing the Hand of the Gods to essentially shoot light magic at Kholek. So they kind of equal out on that. And then you look at their defenses. Kholek is covered head to toe in some really heavy plate armor, and he has a pretty solid scaly skin setup going on for him, like most Dragon Ogres do. However, that's pretty much his only defense, at least from a lore and tabletop background. In Total War, they added the Aura of the Storm, I think it's called, that gives him like a 25% ward save, which just makes him bonkers in the campaign. But Kroq-Gar, from a lore and tabletop perspective, literally has this aura around him that is basically the Old One Zodal, who is this horribly powerful Old One of destiny and greatness and all these other very crucial and important elements to Lizardman culture, basically in an echo of Zodal almost, watches over him, and this causes blows to either be completely robbed of their power or just flat out turned aside from hitting either Kroq-Gar or Grimlock. And from a tabletop perspective, that is actually what makes Kroq-Gar one of the scariest mounted characters in the game, if he's actually taken properly, is that he is one of the only people who has a ward save for both himself and his mount. In Warhammer lore, most mounts are pretty easy to kill from underneath special characters. Many of them, of course, have special mounts who end up being super survivable, but very few of them, or most of them, have pretty heavy plot armor. But when you look at Grimlock, Grimlock is much more of a figure who is incredibly ancient, and Karnastars are much like Saurus warriors in that the older they are, the bigger and tougher they get, and stronger, of course. And Grimlock is the biggest, meanest, and toughest Karnastar alive, and is, easily, he's older than Krokgar is, technically. Barely, but the point stands. And this age really shows itself in that both Krokgar and Grimlock have very significantly tough, thick, scaly skin that provides them with, the equivalent, essentially, of Chaos armor. It's so tough and just resistant to damage. And that's on top of Krokgar also having plate armor, golden plate armor, that covers most of his upper body. So when it comes to defenses, they're easily on par, if not well ahead, of Kolek Suneater. So when those two come to blows, it really just comes down to luck. Grimlock and Krokgar historically are a tad, but it matters at this point, bit faster when it comes to exchanging blows, but they're slower when it comes to moving compared to Kolek. But Kolek also can kind of afford to take more damage in a single exchange, because obviously to defeat Kolek you have to just kill him outright, whereas to defeat Grimlock and Krokgar, you can kind of manage to just kill one of them, and that should gimp the pair enough that Kolek would be able to finish him off. So it really comes down to that first initial clash, in that if Krokgar and Grimlock manage to be a bit faster than Kolek, which they are in combat, if you look at their tabletop stats, which of course are not perfect representatives of what they are in the lore, but it's kind of the only thing we can really draw from when you get this nitty-gritty of a showdown. You have Grimlock and Krokgar just a tiny bit faster, and let me tell you, if Grimlock can get his full load of attacks into Kolek, like if he can actually get his teeth into Kolek, Kolek's fucked. Like, it's his armor would provide 0 defense, and Grimlock would just murder him. Krokgar is more there to provide defense. Krokgar is what brings the aura of the gods into play that can cheat Kolek of his blows and like completely rob them of any strength, while also the Reverend Spear of Tlanxla also kind of has this nasty effect that every time you get stabbed by it, it basically saps your will to fight, and Kolek's defenses are pretty bad. Kolek is not a defensive character. He's really huge, and he relies on his massive bulk to keep him alive. And when I say that, I mean it just takes a lot of damage to kill him. But unfortunately for Kolek, Krokgar and Grimlock specialize in putting out tons of damage, but they're also much tankier than Kolek is. Kolek, if they swung simultaneously at each other's faces, Kolek has a better chance to do damage, but Krokgar actually has the ability to mitigate it. Whereas every single attack that Krokgar and Grimlock land on Kolek is instantly going through and is going to do a ton of damage. So I would say that the strongest person Krokgar and Grimlock can beat is maybe Kolek, but it's a maybe, and it depends on your interpretation about how the fight would go, and obviously different factors. That being said, that's question 1, so let's keep moving. Alright, question 2 is asked by Marillion, who says, the world has this geomantic web. Can it, and the great plan of the Old Ones, be ever fully restored, since so many Slann are dead and important parts are not under control? This is a good question. So, from the lore perspective of Warhammer Fantasy, where Total War Warhammer starts, the realistic answer is no. The great plan could never realistically be pulled off by the Lizardmen, because it would require the eradication of all of the Chaos Influence races, which the Lizardmen just don't have the means to do. Kill one of them, maybe 2 of them, they could probably pull off, but it would be a suicide pact. Like, the Lizardmen might be able to take out, like, the Skaven and maybe, like, the Chaos Dwarves, if they really push themselves, or, maybe they'd be able to take down the Warriors of Chaos, but in the process of doing that, the Skaven or the Lizardmen would completely spend all of their resources and would be totally wiped out. That being said, and then when you look at the geomantic web is pretty much impossible to restore in the modern age because so many of the points on it have been so badly damaged. Like, the temple city of Chupyodel sank beneath the ocean and is now inhabited by like this horrifying race of fish people. And many of them have been turned into icons for the dark gods and have been perverted so badly that they can never be restored. Or, they've just been outright obliterated by some sort of cataclysmic force or a meteor falling from the sky or all sorts of things. So, from a lore-wise perspective, could it ever be fully restored? No. But that's where I'm really excited for the Total War Warhammer campaign, because Total War allows the opportunities for the Lizardmen to accomplish things that just aren't possible really in the lore. Like, they have the ability to go wipe out the Skaven. They have the ability to go wipe out the Dark Elves and reclaim all of these things and manage to be warlike but clever about it and capture at least enough of the points that they could actually fix the Great Plan. Total War kind of brings in this narrative idea of the ability for the Lizardmen to produce continuous forces, which I guess lore-wise could have technically happened if there had just been like a massive influx of spawnings coming out of the spawning pools, but that never happened, unfortunately. So, like, from the full canonicity of the lore, no, it's not possible. But within Total War, well, that's the whole point of the campaign, and I'm personally really looking forward to enacting the Great Plan and fixing the world from its terrible, horrible mistake that it's become since Chaos entered the world. Next question. Alright, the Gale 35 asks, what is the best Lizardmen infantry unit? That is easily the Temple Guard. The Temple Guard are, of course, the guardians of the Slann, and they typically wield shields in one hand and big-ass halberds in the other hand. They are very ancient, very powerful, extremely stubborn. They're practically unbreakable. One of the most reliable units in tabletop and in the lore. If there's a Slann hiding in them, you're just not going to budge. You're literally going to have to kill every single one to get to the Slann. And they are not nice in close combat. They will tear your shit up. Temple Guard can go toe-to-toe with the likes of Chosen and Black Orcs and other powerful melee infantry, and usually when they have a Slann buffing them from behind, it's not even a contest most of the time. The Temple Guard just wipe the floor with them. I've been to many tournaments in my life, and there is no unit that has garnered me more success and more ire from my enemy than Temple Guard with a Slann pulling the strings from the middle of the unit. So, yes, the Temple Guard are definitely the leaders of the Lizardmen infantry roster, without a doubt. Moving on, Nick Oravets asks, if the Lizardmen are dominant in Lustria and are wary of intruders, why are there permanent settlements from other factions, such as the Norscan settlement Skeggi near Hexadal? So this is a great question. If you look at a map of Lustria, you'll see a couple of points dotted around, especially on the Isthmus of Pahax, which is where Hexadal is located, where you'll see a couple of settlements, and most of them are human. So the first thing you need to know is that, with the exception of Skeggi, every single one of these settlements has been completely obliterated or flattened. The only other exception, of course, being the Citadel of Dusk, or Dawn, one of the two, that is at the tip of Lustria, southern Lustria. And the only reason the Lizardmen don't mess with that is because that's actually a very crucial nexus point in the Great Warding. And the High Elves, without realizing it, when they found that site a long time ago, they found some ancient Lizardmen architecture, and they just built a fortress on top of it. And the Lizardmen sort of looked at it and were basically like, you know what? They're protecting it, so fuck it. That's fine. And the Lizardmen have actually come to the High Elves' aid at least once, probably more than that in the lore, but one time we know for sure, which is when a giant Dark Elf fleet came down to invade to destroy the tower and take it for themselves. And the Lizardmen literally showed up, came out of the southern jungle, and the fortress is on an island just off the southern tip of Lustria. And the Slann created a magical bridge, and the Saurus and all the Lizardmen's legions just walked over it, parked themselves between the High Elves and the Dark Elves on the beach, and basically fought side by side with the High Elves against this huge Dark Elf invasion. And like the High Elves didn't even realize they were under attack because it was a Dark Elf ambush with a massive navy, which, I mean, put into perspective how bad the High Elves were doing to have been ambushed by like a giant navy. But the High Elves didn't realize they were under attack until the Lizardmen showed up, and they initially thought the Lizardmen were going to attack them. And then when the Lizardmen just sort of nonchalantly walked past them and went to the beach, the High Elves like followed them with their, repeater bolt throwers and or eagle claw bolt throwers, either way, or in our archers and Lothran Sea Guard. They were like, "Oh shit, there's a Dark Elf army," and so they fought side by side. After the battle ended, the Lizardmen did not a single Lizardman said a word to a High Elf the entire fight or afterwards, and the Lizardmen just turned around and walked back across the bridge back into the jungle and didn't say a thing. And the High Elves were like, "Okay, thanks." So, the other settlement that exists on Lustria that the Lizardmen haven't messed with is Skeggy. And the reason the Lizardmen haven't dealt with Skeggy is that you have to understand that although the Lizardmen are, yes, wary of intruders, the Lizardmen are very, very slow to make decisions, typically. If you show up on Lustria and you park on the coast, unless you are like a significant Chaos Fleet invasion and you're making yourself very obvious, the Lizardmen probably don't care. And Skeggy was just a human settlement, and the humans are part of the Great Plan. Even if they're Norskins and they worship the Dark Gods, the Lizardmen don't really see them as anything but humans. Like, the Lizardmen have a hard enough time. I'll put it this way. The Lizardmen really struggle to see the difference between Dark Elves and High Elves. The Slaanesh look at the two of them and they're like, they're the same, but they're fighting. and these elves over here wearing purple and black are kind of douchey and keep stealing our stuff, while these elves wearing white and silver and blue are like defending our stuff. So I guess they're like the good guys, but like the Lizardmen don't get it really, because they don't really have a concept of civil war like that. And so to them, the humans being in Skeggy is not that big of a deal, as long as they mind their own business. What happened to the other settlements is they kept raiding the temple cities and kept stealing important stuff. If you show up to a Lizardman ruin and you peel some gold plating off of one of their streets and run off with it, the Lizardmen don't give a shit. It's whatever. They don't care. Gold's not meaningless to them. However, if you steal a relic of the Old Ones, a plaque containing a portion of the Great Plan, or some other significant artifact, the Lizardmen are going to come after you with everything they have. And essentially, Skeggy, the ruler of Skeggy, which for many years I believe was Lost Eriksson, yes, because he named the settlement after his daughter, who he named Skeggy. She was born on the Lustria. He was very, very good about whenever the Lizardmen would show up, like would start invading Skeggy, he would get all the people in the city together and he'd say, throw all the shit you've stolen from them into the ocean. And they'd throw it all in the ocean, and the Lizardmen would march right past them, go into the ocean, grab what they wanted, and leave. Because the Lizardmen don't care. They're not really there to fight you. They got better things to do with their time. That being said, El Cadavo, which was another human settlement, they fucked up because they kept stealing really important stuff from Hexadol, of all places, and kept getting too close to the city and kept drawing too much attention to themselves. And they ended up waking up Mazdamundi 3 times within the same decade, which is roughly 5 minutes. And so imagine if you kept trying to go to sleep and this annoying, like, neighborhood kid kept throwing baseballs at your window. You'd get super pissed if he did it 3 times, right? Like, the first time, you're kind of irritated, but it's like, whatever, he's just a kid. The second time, it's like, alright, I'm getting pretty annoyed. Like, you better stop it. And I should note, each time it happened, Mazdamundi, like, went down there and, like, did a bunch of damage. Like, he would send in a small army or whatever. So, effectively, he slapped the kid in the face the first 2 times. And then the third time, Mazdamundi was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm done with this. Told the skinks to bring him the biggest Stegodon they had, which was Zalak, who is his mount now. He put his palanquin on Zalak, and he basically went by himself to El Cadavo and was like, alright, this party's over, and caused a massive earthquake that literally turned the settlement into a pancake and just reduced everyone living in it to a bloody pile of mush. So, he went from, like, kind of slapping the neighborhood kid to just brutally murdering him out in the street and destroying his home and all evidence that he ever existed. And then then went home and got some sleep and was able to meditate and do all the stuff he wanted to do. So the moral of the story is that you can live and exist in Lustria and have a settlement as long as you don't fuck with the Lizardmen. If you mess with them and you make them mad or steal something that they consider valuable, they will come after you, they will find you, and they will kill you. Or if you throw it in the ocean, they'll just take it back and leave. So pretty much when it comes to those settlements, the Lizardmen don't care because they don't consider them a threat. If you make yourself a threat, then they care. So that is the moral of the story, and that hopefully answers your question. So, moving on to number 5. Salem Aldness asks, Karnastar versus a War Sphinx, who would win? Easily the Karnastar, not even close. The War Sphinx relies almost entirely on a very high toughness, as it's made of stone, and a Karnastar would chew through that no problem. Plus, the War Sphinx is a anti-infantry monster. It's not really designed to take on other monsters. It has a special design that makes it more equipped to deal with large groups of infantry. So you may have met the Necrosphinx, which is the anti-monster and anti-character Sphinx, but the Necrosphinx is sort of this goofy. It was really weirdly designed. And it has like a cool idea behind it in that it's like a flying statue that has a giant blade arms, and it has the ability to decapitate monsters in a single blow. The downside is, because it can do that, Games Workshop decided to design this creature lore-wise and strategy-wise that swoops in on you, and it basically goes for a decapitating strike, and if it doesn't get it, it just dies. It just gets brutally murdered most of the time. So I would say most of the time the Karnastar is going to come out on top in those matchups. Ristoff2224 asks, I am new to Games Workshop and just started my Seraphon army and would like some more lore of the world. Where do I start? Okay, so this will be a fairly quick one. If you're wanting to get into Age of Sigmar lore, you want to pick up the Seraphon Battle Tome, and you want to pick up the short story called Beneath the Black Thumb. If you want to understand the Seraphon entirely, you kind of have to understand the Lizardmen, because most of their lore is based on what happened to the Lizardmen. So in that case, I would recommend the 8th edition army book for the Lizardmen, the Thanquol book 2 of his series, which is, I believe, called The Temple of the Serpent. And I would also highly recommend picking up the softback version of the narrative from End Times book 4, which is called Thanquol. So hopefully that'll help you out getting started and learning as much of the lore you need to learn to really understand your Seraphon army. Let's see. Lucas O asks, what is their view on the dead? I know there is a sort of dwarven-like ancestor cult with some Slann, but what about the regular Saurus? Are they even buried/burned, or is there a jungle circle of life theme? Okay, so when a Slann dies, every single Slann, if the Lizardmen can, which they do most cases, they will gather up the remnants of the Slann's body and they will mummify it, regardless of how the Slann died. And they basically mummify it, wrap it in like bindings and all this other stuff, and they make what's called a relic priest, and that's what Lord Croak is. He is the mummified corpse of a Slann. Now, Slann have this unique habit to them where they are so powerful and so in tune with magic that when they die, quote unquote, they don't actually, like, their physical bodies die, but their spirits very rarely leave. The most powerful of the Slann, Lord Croak being the preeminent among them, stick around. Like, their spirits just keep floating pretty close to their bodies, and they're able to very subtly influence the world around them, while also usually casting like an echo of certain spells. So like in Lord Croak's case, he basically casts a echo or a remnant of the last spell he ever cast, which was crazy powerful. And even though it's just an echo, so it's like a minor form of it, it's still a devastating spell on the battlefield. And Lord Croak still possesses the ability to basically possess or mentally take over for a few seconds a skink priest or a Slann to use them to cast his spell from their position. Croak, now, the relic priests can't communicate from death. They can only sort of influence, like, they can sort of look through them, and they can give them little guiding hints by, like, you know, giving them, like, a hint of, like, I feel like I should go this direction, or they can cast like the whatever spell they have access to through that vessel. But other than that, they're not able to communicate at all. And as for the rest of the Lizardmen, they sometimes, if Lizardmen do anything with their dead, they mummify them. Usually they will take pieces of like champions and pass down their bones. So like every single temple guard, those helmets that they wear on their head are the helmets from the previous generations of temple guard. So every single temple guard that's ever existed is been passed down in a line of temple guard. And the reason the Lizardmen do that is because the sentience and the knowledge of every temple guard who's ever worn that helm remains in a way inside of it. So every temple guard that wears it contains the knowledge, the skills, and the ideas of all the temple guard who've ever worn that helm before him, which is why the temple guard are these very stoic, powerful, ingenious defenders, even when they're freshly spawned, because they actually have thousands of years of experience literally popped onto their head. As for the rest of the Lizardmen, that's pretty much it. Usually they'll if there was a particularly amazing Stegodon, maybe they'll take his skull and turn it into some sort of powerful relic. Or if there was a Croxagore who was really famous, maybe they'll mummify his corpse. But most Lizardmen, if they die, they just sort of leave them. They don't worry about it too much. The Lizardmen aren't concerned with death. They're not afraid of it. They don't think about it much. They don't have cults about it. To a Lizardman, all that matters is fulfilling your great purpose and fulfilling the great plan. And as long as you are doing something to fulfill that, they don't care. They were made for a purpose, and they live solely to fulfill that purpose. So that's pretty much the answer to that question. Our next question comes from Broship, who asks, has there ever been instances of armed conflict between the Lizardmen? For example, Lustria versus Southlands, or Old One worship versus Sotek worship? No, not really. In 8th edition lore, there is no infighting between the Lizardmen. They completely retconned all signs of that out, and the Lizardmen, there are arguments between the Slann, and, if one of them wins, they won't talk to each other for a while. But they don't fight each other. However, if you go back just to 7th edition, there was a singular, very humorous event in the Imperial year of 2100 where a group of skink priests were hanging around a relic priest whose name was Lord Chili Peppa, and I wish I was making that up. And he had a bunch of mosquitoes circling his head, and the skink priests got into a debate about what it meant, what prophecy it was foretelling or whatever, because skinks are very superstitious. They're incredibly superstitious, and the Slann think they're idiots because of it. And so these group of skink priests got into such a heated debate that they actually started fighting with each other, and each one of the skink priests essentially went to his own little group of skink fanatics and convinced them that he was right, and there was basically a minor civil war over who got to control the remains of this relic priest, which I'm sure was very promptly shut down when a Slann realized what the fuck was going on and probably woke up and was very irritated. However, in the modern edition, or 8th edition, which is what Total War Warhammer is based off of, no. They got rid of all the unfortunate... They kind of got rid of a lot of the goofy elements of the Lizardmen, like Lord Chili Peppa. Most, not all, but most of the puns and some of the other goofy things about the Lizardmen were eliminated entirely in 8th edition, which kind of robbed them of some of their charm. But what are you going to do? So, no. The answer is no. Question number 9 from RM80835. What is the difference between legendary heroes and legendary lords in the tabletop, and of the known and named Lizardmen who are considered legendary hero and who is considered a legendary lord? Thinking of characters like Oxyotl, Teto Echo, and so forth. Okay, so in Warhammer tabletop, there's 2 different classifications of characters. There are lords, which are your extremely expensive, very powerful characters who, if they're not really, really amazing in melee or super powerful casters, then they usually have a really unique ability. Heroes, on the other hand, are more like glorified unit champions. Heroes are able to be wizards. Heroes are like the base level of wizards. And the fighters are basically champions, powerful guys who you would put in the center of a unit who will really hold the line or do a lot of damage, or maybe grant just the unit he's in a unique ability, while, you know, a lord would grant like an army a unique ability. So that's kind of the difference in classifications between the two. And with the Lizardmen, the 3 legendary lords, which we call special characters in tabletop, are Lord Croak, who, if you don't know about, he's the first Slaanesh that ever existed, and he's a relic priest, so he's dead, but his spirit hangs around. Lord Mazdamundi, who you probably know who that is at this point, and Krokgar, who you know who that is at this point. The heroes are Tic-Tac-Toe, who is the master of the skies, and he's a pterodon rider, and he's the big boss of Hexadal's defenses when Mazdamundi is not around. And if none of the Slaanesh can be woken up, which is frequently what happens. Then you have Gorok, who is the great white lizard, and he's this big albinosaurus, and he's huge for a saurus. And he has a shield that's so big that most other saurus can't even pick it up. And he's also got a giant ass mace, and he's so big that a dark elf once tried to ram him with a Cold One chariot, and Gorok literally just planted his shield on the ground, and the chariot just exploded when it ran into him, and he just did not care. Gorok is crazy tough, and is a very beloved figure among the Lizardman community. Then you have Chakax, who is the Temple Guard hero, and he is the prime guardian of the City of the Moon. And his job is, he's the #1 defender of the Slaanesh. Whenever the Slaanesh go out, he's going to be with them. And he has a giant 2-handed mace. I don't know what to call it. It's giant, though. And he is an expert duelist. He can, if you get in a duel with him or a challenge, he goes up against an enemy character, he will butcher the hell out of them. And for being just a hero, he will absolutely knock you on your ass if you try and get into a challenge with him. So he's really good for defending Slaanesh. Then there is Teto Echo, who is basically the skink equivalent to a Slaanesh. He's a Loremaster of the Lore of Heavens. He has his own palanquin, which is that little cool seat that the Slaanesh float on, so he floats around. And he's the oldest skink that's not an immortal prophet, who just reminds me I forgot someone that I'll come back to in a moment. And Teto Echo he's just a very powerful caster. Then you have Oxyodal, who is a chameleon skink, and he is basically just a super hardcore sniper. He's very difficult to see because he blends in with his environment, and he literally walked from the realm of chaos all the way back down to Lustria because his temple city, with him included, got teleported to the realm of chaos during the opening stages of the war. And he spent thousands and thousands of years walking back to Lustria because he's so good at stealthing and sniping people. He's really badass. And then, of course, I cannot believe I did, but the last legendary lord I forgot, who is a lord, is Tenenwan, who is the prophet of Sotek, which is where I take my channel's namesake after, the Loremaster of Sotek. And Tenenwan is this couple thousand-year-old skink who is the living avatar of Sotek, the serpent god. And he's the one who started the religion and ushered him into the world, and is terrifying in close combat, is also a very adept caster, so he's actually the only Lizardman hybrid character. You know, he's good at magic and he's good at fighting, and he's the only character like that. He's also the only skink lord that exists. Skinks only go up to hero classification in the Lizardman army. They don't go up to lord. Lords are only Saurus and only Slaanesh, with the exception of Tenenwan, who's just that much of a badass. So I believe that's all of them. I mean, there's also Nakai the Wanderer, who is basically the equivalent of the Kroxigor special character, and he is basically a living legend. He's kind of like the Green Knight, but he's a Kroxigor and for the Lizardmen. So, take the Green Knight and turn him into a giant, 15-foot crocodile man who can ambush and is like a jungle spirit that comes out of the bush where you can't see him, and he's albino, and he just fucking wrecks your day. That's basically Nakai the Wanderer, and I love him to death, and I hope we see him one day. And that's pretty much all the Lizardman special characters, so moving on. And for today's final question, Richard Brown asks, How does everyday Lizardman life work? Do they do anything for entertainment, or do the skinks just tend to the farms and construction, source, patrol, and Slaw meditate? So, the first time I tried to answer this question, I went into like a 20-minute tirade, and I've decided I need to just make it a simpler version of, no. The Lizardmen are, at their core, animalistic automatons, which means that they don't feel emotions like we do. You know, they don't feel anything that we can identify with. They're so well designed for their purpose and the goals they're supposed to do and the jobs they're supposed to have, that when they come out of the spawning pools, they are perfectly designed by the old ones to perform that duty and to do it to perfection, and that's all they do for their entire life. And this is reflected in like their languages. So like the Saurus have a very simple language that only has concepts like war, fighting, tactics, food, sleep, defense, you know, and things that pertain to their immediate concerns. The Saurus don't have any concept nor understand or have words to express, you know, ideas like love or fun or art or music, besides like a marching drum to march in time, you know, or any of those other things. Like those are things that they don't understand. They weren't designed to understand them, so they don't even have language for it. Kroxigors are the exact same. You know, they have words for fighting and construction, because that's primarily what they were used for. It was carrying the large blocks and helping construct the temples and other structures of the Lizardmen. But, you know, they have a super simple language that has very few subjects. And once again, they're designed to be perfect for what they were intended for. You know, skinks have a much more complicated language, but that's because they handle all the sort of finesse of the Lizardman society. You know, they're your architects, your engineers, your translators, your beast capturers, your beast tamers. You know, they kind of need to be jacks of all trades. And so they have a much more complicated and fluent language that is very complex. And they're the ones that can actually, like, handle translating, you know, the languages of the other creatures in the Warhammer world to whatever the hell it is the Lizardmen speak, which I don't think has an official name. It's written down. It's actually possible to speak the Lizardman tongue, but Games Workshop purposely made it so that it's actually not possible for humans to speak it, because it intentionally uses reptilian noises, and the way they wrote it is just goofy as shit. But the long story short is you can't actually speak it in any like Khazalid you can actually try and speak, so you can do the same for Eltharin. But the Lizardman language, not so much. So that I hope that pretty much answers that question. Every one of the Lizardman society, if they don't do, they're never bored. They're never, you know, just screwing off, shooting the shit. They are busy and active and always doing something. You know, the Slawn, the Skinks, the Kroxigors, and the Saurus are always busy. Always busy. So I hope that answers your question. So in any event, those are the 10 questions that we're going to be tackling today. I had hoped to do more, but at the end of the day, I want this video to not be an hour long, and we're almost to 40. We're probably going to hit just below 40 minutes. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Obviously, this is a new thing, so if you liked it, please let me know. Like, hit the like button and like say something in the comment section, because, you know, this I like doing something like this, and I hope it's something you guys enjoy. For those of you who are wondering exactly how the format is going to work, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to do, so like this week I did Lizardmen. So I think what I might do is next week I'm going to do High Elves. So in the comment section for this video is where you would post your questions about High Elves, or you can go to my Discord channel and post questions there. I'm not going to bother using Reddit because that didn't work. So either of those two places will work. And I have all the questions that got asked about the Lizardmen, and at some point I will rotate back to Lizardmen and I'll answer another 10 questions. That way we're kind of hitting fresh topics, and y'all are able to ask new questions as like information comes out or you play the game or whatever. And we'll probably focus on like the game 2 subjects and races for a little while. You know, like maybe we'll do a Q&A on like Lustria or the old ones or the Vortex or something like that. But I think for next week, let's go ahead and do High Elves, since the Lizardman trailer was like 50% Lizardman, 50% High Elves. So let's do the Asur. So any questions you have about the High Elves, post them down below. I will do the same thing where I will randomly pick somewhere between 10 and 15 of them, and I will try and land it around 40 minutes, I guess, is what I'm going for. So thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoy my content, please consider joining up on my Patreon and supporting me that way for as little as $1 a month. It helps me out a lot and keeps the channel going, especially these days when times are hard for many people. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. I hope it was up to what you were expecting, and I will see you guys next week. We will do this every Saturday. There will be a Q&A video every Saturday. So hope you all have a great day. I will be seeing you around quite a bit. Thanks. Have a good night, guys.